Hello there! Welcome to the world of Pokemon. These were the first words spoken to me by Professor Oak when I started my Pokemon journey as a kid. To this day, I am still into the Pokemon franchise, and I have put an extensive amount of time into playing these games. But I'd like to take a closer look, or listen rather, at the sound elements of Pokemon. From its distinctive soundtrack to unique audio effects, Pokemon has become a game that any Pokemon trainer like myself can identify once the sound of a Pokemon game reaches our ears. In addition, in order to get some good Pokemon game audio, I will be playing some Pokemon games here on any available, Nintendo handheld gaming system that I own to hopefully capture some of that sound that I will be talking out throughout this video, and it'll give you some ideas of Pokemon audio throughout each game. So, before we begin, what exactly is Pokemon? The idea started with Satoru Tajiri in 1995 when he created the concept that people can catch and train creatures called Pokemon to battle each other and create friendly bonds as the trainer and their Pokemon journey together. Game developer Game Freak and publisher Nintendo released the first Pokemon games in Japan in 1996 and then in the US in 1998. There were differences in these international versions of the games, such as Japan getting a red and green version, while the US got red and blue versions. The differences between versions is really what kinds of Pokemon you can catch in them. Graphics and especially sound remain pretty much the same between versions, so let's start there. Alright, so Pokemon Red and Blue version were created for the Game Boy handheld video game system. So that meant there were certain limitations when it came to the audio of Game Boy games and the Game Boy system. The 8-bit system came with one speaker on the device, although there was a headphone port for stereo listening. Right now this is plugged into my Zoom, so you can hear some audio I'm about to play. However, stereo sound was not heavily utilized until much later in the Pokemon franchise, as Nintendo began to develop more. Pokemon, as well as all Game Boy systems, use 8-bit soundtracks. 8-bit synthesized sound is what would be described as retro sounding, as people still use that today for aesthetic purposes. The Pokemon world is divided into regions, each region containing different kinds of Pokemon. Pokemon Red, Blue, and Green versions for the Game Boy took place in the Kanto region. In the Kanto region, players must venture through different towns and cities, one of which is Lavender Town. It is here that I want to touch on some special audio topics in Pokemon. Each town in the Pokemon world has its own soundtrack or theme song, and Lavender Town has one of the most controversial soundtracks that plays right as you step foot in town in-game. Let's have a listen. A bit dark and unsettling, right? Well, that would seem fit for a town that had its own Pokemon cemetery where trainers laid their Pokemon to rest when they, died. It doesn't end there. There were reports of kids having irritation and headaches when listening to the game through headphones due to the high-frequency sounds of the Lavender Town song in the red and green versions in Japan. Stories have varied, each telling about more severe symptoms such as vomiting and, in some extreme cases, suicide. While you and I might believe it or not, it really gets one thinking about the effects of psychoacoustics and how a simple children's game could have such a great effect. As for me, I'm still here, but I'll admit that this song still creeps me out, and I don't spend too much time in Lavender Town when playing Pokemon. To brighten things up a bit, here's one of the most popular Pokemon, Pikachu.
Pikachu is the most iconic Pokemon in both the game and anime as being Ash's trusty companion throughout the series.
Oh, hi, Pikachu!
Pika.
It's also known as Electric Mouse. It's usually shy, but can sometimes have an electrifying personality.
Pikachu got quite a bit of attention when Pokemon Yellow was released in '98 in Japan. In a standard Pokemon game, you get to choose who your first Pokemon will be, but in Yellow version, you were given a Pikachu to start with, which was inspired by the anime.
The Pokemon.
Does that mean all the Pokemon are gone?
Well, there is still one left, but I...
Professor, I'll take it!
When starting up this version of the game, you get greeted by Pikachu. Did you hear that? That was the actual voice of Pikachu, or, well, at least the recorded sound of the voice actor. This was significant because this was the first time in a Pokemon game that a recorded voice was used for a Pokemon's cry instead of the usual 8-bit sound effects. As you journeyed with your Pikachu, it even said different things depending on the situation, such as if you were in battle. Well, what about other Pokemon? What do they sound like? Well, let's stick with Pikachu for just a bit longer. Here's Pikachu's cry in Pokemon Yellow version.
Pikachu. Pika. Pikachu.
And here's Pikachu's standard cry. A lot different, isn't it? Here are some other examples. A Pokemon's cry is unique to itself. A great Pokemon master would be able to identify any Pokemon just based on their cry, as well as you could tell a dog's bark from a cow's moo. Strange how they all share that 8-bit sound characteristic and yet sound so unique from each other. Now, that was Pokemon back then. Pokemon games are still continuing to be developed because people like me can't get enough of it. With that comes change in the sound. With every new Pokemon game comes the next generation, meaning more Pokemon, new regions, and most importantly, more sounds for you and I to listen to. The Pokemon franchise is now in their 6th generation of Pokemon with the release of Pokemon XY versions in 2013. To show how much has changed, here's a cry from the 1st generation, and here's a cry in the 6th generation. So, how did we get to this point? I'm going to show the evolution of a Pokemon's cry throughout each generation. As you can tell, as we progress, the more hi-fi and complex the sound gets. But it's not just cries that have changed. Remember how I said that each town has its own song? Well, the sounds of those towns change with every generation as well. Let's take the town you start out at in the 1st generation, Pallet Town, and move down the line. To add to that, some Pokemon games have had remade versions of themselves. In 2004, Pokemon Red and Green version were remade into Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green respectively. This allowed a way for the new Pokemon to be used in previous regions, but more importantly, the audio was redone for the remade games. Let's revisit Lavender Town and compare it to its re-release. Okay, so we've covered the first generation and its unique audio effects and elements and how the audio of Pokemon has changed over the years. So what special audio things have been done in recent games? Well, take a look at this guy. This is Chatot, which was a Pokemon made to be like a parrot. So guess what he could do? Chatot had a unique ability to take a sound recorded by the trainer and then use it in battle. How is this possible? Chatot was introduced in the 4th generation of Pokemon, Diamond and Pearl, which was released in 2006 for the Nintendo DS system. One of the features of the Nintendo DS was a microphone. Although not great sounding in audio quality, it was through this that allowed a person to record sounds for the Chatot to use in battle. I'm going to demonstrate what Chatot can do. Just a sec. So here, with my Pokemon, I have Chatot, which has been nicknamed to Chara because I got it from a trade. And here you see the move Chatter. This is the special move that I said. Let's see. Press the A or B button, then speak into the microphone. The microphone's located right here. I'm a tell it to recognize this sound, and then it'll play it during battle. Hello. As you can tell, the mic isn't so great. Neither was it great in the old DS. This is the DSi, but it was quite a neat feature to have, despite, you know, the mic quality wasn't so great. But here, I'll enter battle. Let's see. Here, let me try using it. Okay. So I'm gonna enter battle, and then here, listen for it. That little sound you heard was me saying hello, but, you know, with my mic not being so great on the DSi, especially this is really old. This is the as best as I could get it, but point proven that Nintendo really did take an extra step into creating a parrot-type Pokemon. Another unique audio feature I'd like to bring up was used in Pokemon Black and White in the 5th generation of Pokemon. As discussed before, each town has its own song, but this place was special. While it did have its own song, the player could go places around the area to find people who changed the layering or scoring of the background song. Here I'm talking to this guy, right? He's saying la la la. Now, after I'm done talking to him, let me turn it up a bit. Notice how the background audio started having beatboxing. I think there's a person right here. Yeah. And this guy should add a flute, or whatever that is. He'll add the flute or that kind of sound to the song. This guy. He is holding a guitar. Guess what he'll add? Well, there you have it, folks. There was a ton of audio to cover from the Pokemon games. It's amazing to see, or rather hear, the changes that Pokemon game audio has taken since its first release. Yet, there are distinct audio features that were used across all Pokemon games that set them apart from each other. That's why I think Pokemon games have continued to be successful, because they feel and sound new with each new game. This is Justin McCosbuck, and thanks for watching my audio analysis of Pokemon games. As you can see, my blue version is slightly corrupted right now. That's supposed to be a... Well, I don't know what that's supposed to be. There's different Pokemon there. It's clearly not a square every time. Anyways.